So, panel, and I'll let you, whoever wants to start. We hear about AI everywhere. Obviously, we're here at an event about sustainability. But what do you see AI's true potential to drive efficiency and sustainability based on the perspective you bring? I don't know if we want to go down the line, starting with you, David.
Happy to. I mean, from our point of view, much of the conversation, particularly if I think about carbon and scope 3, is about changing data into actionable information. And AI absolutely speeds that process up. If I think back to where we were on SBTIs and 5 years ago, the information, the insights we used was directional, enough for SBTI, but not enough to create strategic investment focus. What we've been working hard on is using AI to really strengthen that data set, to give us absolute focus on the hotspots, and that then unlocks strategic investment. And we've shifted from what is directional information, directional data, into really actionable information with the help of AI.
Let me ask you, before we continue this discussion, is there a conflict of interest in using AI to meet things like the science-based initiative targets when AI uses so much energy? It is not innately sustainable.
Well, I think you have to be alive to all of your, emission, where you create emissions. And so I don't think there is that compromise as long as you're alive to, I switch to that. But that doesn't come without some emissions cost. The same is true about some of the things that historically people haven't reported in an awful lot of detail, some of the bought-in services, some particular things like digital marketing often sits outside of standard emissions. There's no reason why it should do, but it's because it's been vague. If AI starts to allow you to have the focus and a much greater degree of accuracy, then you bring it into the mix and you tackle it. So you see the entirety much more readily because of AI, rather than it being a conflict of interest.
Sarah, how do you think about AI and its potential?
Yes, I wanted desperately to do this panel because I think what David is saying is really, really interesting. And yesterday, some of us had a conversation as well in terms of how AI can help with data quality. And I think also many of us have been part of conversations about how it can help with supply chain issues. And but my angle is really how it can help drive more sustainable behavior from a consumer point of view. Because, a company like Electrolux is a big appliance maker, a Swedish company, is the majority at the moment in the current energy mix, the vast majority, I think globally, is 85% of our impact is post-purchase. So it really matters, not just like buy most energy efficient appliance, but also how you use it. So, for example, there are different types of AI, but already what we do is, say, for instance, a washing machine, you put in a load, low AI can detect, okay, what type of garments do you have? What type of, what's the load like? How heavy is it? And what are the stains like? So it can automatically adjust how much detergent you need. Again, detergent uses, as you would know, a lot of CO2. So that's a really, really smart way. And again, balancing the human centricity and how it enables sustainable behavior choices with the increased carbon.
Yeah.
So it has to be obviously supporting behavior that you already want the consumer to do. But on the other hand, it can't be gimmicky. And I think that's you see it a little bit at the moment where it's just like for the sake of it. But I think if it helps you making better choices, it's great. Something that we're working on again, like you find that most appliances get thrown out because there's a fault with them and before the ideal lifetime. Now, increasingly, you can use AI for predictive maintenance. So it will help you look after them. So it will increase the lifetime of a product. So it become really, really interesting. And I think those are really good examples how it can help you make better choices.
Are consumers comfortable with the idea they're going to have AI appliances in their homes? Do people want?
I think it's one of these funny things. What I just described about the washing machine and the load, they already have that when they buy a washing machine. It's just, it didn't used to be advertised as AI. It's a little bit like, it makes me laugh in this country. Anyone who is living in this country will know we have like a big issue with heat pumps. That we think they literally like are the devil and like the world is going to end, and our tabloid newspapers, really, really campaign against them. The truth is, your most energy efficient appliances will tumble dryers already have heat pumps in them. So people use these technologies already. It's just at the moment there's this, I think before Trump became elected, all we ever talked about in any conference was AI. We now like slightly moved on. It's such a buzzword at the moment, but it has been in existence in various forms for a long time.
I do want to come back to some of this, but Charlotte, what's your perspective here?
So I'm the CEO of a company called CO2 AI, and
that's why you're on the panel.
and the reason we are called this way is because we've been putting AI at the heart of what we do and the mission which we serve, which is helping the world's largest organizations like Reckitt on their net zero journey. And we use AI in the measurement and improving the data accuracy and granularity, and then all along the way to reduction and proving the impact. So I'm an absolute believer in the power of AI. In the sense that, as David was explaining, it helps a lot in getting good data efficiently. And I think we are at the stage of, we know how hard it's going to be, the battle to net zero. And we see that hurdles are coming our way even more every day today. So we need to fight with the weapons of today, and AI is one. And we need to use all the tools that help us being more efficient and more precise in this battle. And AI is clearly a tool that helps with having actionable data, but also having efficiency. And I'm so tired of seeing all those sustainability teams crunching data manually in Excel spreadsheets, etc. If we can use AI for good on those use cases, let's do it. Let's do it with consciousness, measuring the impact, running a frugal algorithm, making sure that they don't consume too much energy. But these are the best use of artificial intelligence.
Daniel, you obviously look at this from a very different perspective to the people who have spoken so far. How do you see the intersection between sustainability and AI as you think about how to drive investment and innovation in Toronto?
Yeah, and but before I answer that, let me just say that as the Canadian on the panel, I'm glad that we're talking AI and not Trump.
Oh, don't worry. We'll get to Trump at some point.
I'm relieved about that. Look, you're right. We look at AI a little bit differently. I think back to sort of the basics of it, and the potential for AI is almost like humans, right? It's defined by the environment that it grows up in, the people around it, the prosperity in general. AI, the capital that is invested in it, the people that program it and build the models, and the infrastructure around it really helps determine its impact and its outcome. And when you look at that from a city perspective and an industry perspective, where you find the alignment between AI and sustainable outcomes is where policy sort of is enabled in that, and where industrial outcomes are. In Toronto, what we're seeing is that companies really are not just talking about things like efficiency, talking about things like using predictive analytics in their supply chains, they're actually doing it. And so Cohere, many of you have heard of that, a Toronto-based chip design company designing their chips around 15 to 40% more energy efficient. Companies like Canadian Tire and Loblaws, some of our largest retailers, are actually putting into practice supply chain optimization, sustainability, and predictive analytics to reduce waste and wasted food in their system. They're looking at this not as sort of a list of check marks that they need to do. They're looking at it from a competitive advantage. And that's what I think defines the true potential from both the city and industrial perspective. I'll add one more piece to that. Toronto is home to the Vector Institute, which is where Jeffrey Hinton, one of the sort of the leaders in AI, is practicing much of his work. He is talking about AI for good, about ethical AI, about sustainable AI. He is talking about that as the future. And I'm hopeful and encouraged that if we were to come back and have this panel and this discussion 2 or 3 years from now, that is what we'd be talking about when we introduce this topic.
Daniel, I think it's really interesting because you're of the kind of line we've gone down, you're the first person who's talked about the human capital side and the potential labor market side of AI. And there is a perception, and I have already told you I'm agnostic on where I sit on this perception, that AI is going to take jobs. Do you see AI as a way of actually creating a more vibrant labor market in Canada and in Toronto?
Maybe, but that comes at cost. And I think what I worry about when we think about the labor market impact is that it's not understood. And I don't think anyone has done the homework to fully appreciate the impact that's going to have. And sort of just look at the most tangible example. If I'm looking for a job in the next 2-3 years, am I competing against my colleagues or am I competing against the cloud? You look at things like remote work and AI enabling that and people to sort of work from wherever. That means that they might be leaving high-cost city centers. That means they might be working across borders. And that starts to chip away at the financial underpinnings, the prosperity, what drives our cities and our economies. And I think that the labor side, and we're perhaps going to get into this a little bit later in more detail, is actually going to be the driver of much of the challenge that we see in the next decade.
Joanne, what's your perspective on the intersection between AI and sustainability? Where do you see potential?
So there's tons of potential, and I'm listening to this conversation. I'm like, okay, would you like me to take it? So
Wherever you'd like.
I know, really,
It's your show.
Free floating conversations. So the first thing is that we're in the middle of the transformation moment, right? And so yes, right now there's a tension, I think, between the amount of resources we're using and what we're getting out of it. But I think you can hear as this conversation is going on, this transformation moment is also a moment where we're going to start seeing the efficiencies happen, right? I have an Electrolux, thank you very much, dryer and washer. And I love the settings on them, but I can't wait for the next version to come out. I have a beach house. I'm looking forward to the next version. And I watch how already my behavior changes by the optimization of the products, right? And I guarantee all of us don't realize that that is AI in action. But the question, I think the tension is, for all the resources that it takes today for AI to be generated, for those settings to be generated, is that, are we in balance yet? And that's really the question. At MasterCard, we use our data and insights, starting with what David said. We use those insights, and we have been for quite some time, in how we help cities. So I'm talking about London, New York, Toronto, in looking at the ecosystem of cities and sharing those insights with different cities to help create smart cities, improve transportation. You don't feel it yet, but all those taps of those credit cards, right, or your smartphone, actually all of the insight is actually improving the infrastructure and the flow of actually what's going on in a city, that actually reduces the emissions. It makes the train systems better. It makes the bus systems flow better. It actually, all of that is AI being used for sustainable advantage. We aren't counting all of that yet, but that is when we start building those ecosystems out, right? And using the information across all of these opportunities, right? That's when we're going to actually cross over, I think, to see some really powerful change in society. But we're not quite there yet. On the labor point, right? I think what we all have to understand is that the next generations are already adapting to artificial intelligence in ways that we're not, and we have to catch up. We have to understand what models are. How are they created? What's the difference between clustering and classification, test data and training data? Not just the definitional terms, but actually understand how this works. So when we say humans in the loop, we mean all of us in this room and then some, because I do think our jobs are going to change. Agentic AI is going to be real. Many of your organizations have co-pilots happening with you now. That's the first step. When we talk about RAG and using data and actually supplementing and fine-tuning, all of that is also going to drive efficiencies in how we consume foundation and frontier models. So I am looking forward to this transformation, but I don't think we're experiencing all of it yet for that true efficiency moment. I think we're driving toward it. And I agree, in a couple of years, this panel and the conversation is going to feel very, very differently. But I say to everyone I speak with, run toward the change, take a couple of classes. There's some great ones right here in the UK. I've taken the Oxford class, highly recommend recommend it. It's not a commercial, but honestly, take some and you'll be amazed at how quickly you'll learn it. It's like when we all had to learn Excel and we all had to learn Word and we had to learn these basic skill sets again.
I think it's so interesting and it's quite inspiring. I think and I think it's such a good advice as well, because when you think about what the Industrial Revolution must have been and how that absolutely transformed everything, this is happening so quickly.
Yes.
And that's the fear, isn't it? Because we have to process and learn so quickly about a transformation that we don't really understand yet. The whole, the good bits, as you say, extraordinary in terms of the possibilities. And we haven't even talked about medicine yet, but it's like potentially what does it mean for the labor market? And I think that's the bit where I think it makes one nervous, I guess.
Let me ask all of you a question, and I'm sorry, Daniel, we are going to reference, as your countryman said yesterday, the orange man down south. But there's obviously, I know it was very funny. I'm an American and I thought it was funny.
Yeah.
So is there a risk, given that sustainability is a little bit out of fashion from one of the big powerhouses for AI, that AI runs away and we see all the benefits that AI has to offer, but sustainability gets left behind? So is there a risk we create a world that is so technologically forward, but it's being used for non-sustainable purposes? Do you see that as a risk point? Or are you fairly confident that we've started that transformation so far that it's not going to be possible that sustainability gets left behind?
But all of the examples we gave, whether Trump or not is in power, the way MasterCard is using AI is irrelevant. Who is in the White House, isn't it? I mean, or what Electrolux does. I mean, it's.
But you're also here sitting on a sustainability panel, right?
But I'm going to use my position is not a sustainability position, right? I'm data and AI. But I'm also going to say that I think when we look at who our constituents are, right, the next generation of our employees, our customers, your customers are all expecting it, right? Number one. So I think that drive markets, right? Mm-hmm. So no matter what our politicians think of any vintage, right, I think our markets are demanding it. I mean, Electrolux is driving a market, right, that is demanding this. We're trying to build a world that is ready for our children and their children and so on, right? So I think that is already a point of view that is being adopted. We heard this morning of the efficiency of net zero automakers, right? And the batteries being reused to be mini power, I wrote this down actually, mini power plants, right? So actually give power back to households. Imagine how powerful that could be, not just in industrialized societies, but in other parts of our globe, right? It's like there's so many different ways for, I think, this to be an innovation moment. And so I think maybe we might overemphasize innovation now because sustainability has gone out of vogue, much like other things, right? But I think for those of us that are already doing the work, I can't see us unraveling it. I just can't see it going by the way.
So the tipping point.
Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. It's just something that obviously comes to mind. I'm so sorry, David, I cut you off.
No, I was going to say that, for me, if we think about the continuum of the conversation around sustainability, one of the things that's become increasingly clear in the last 4 or 5 years is the complexity of the operating ecosystem that we're all part of. And the fact that the interdependencies are now clearer and more impactful and are becoming harder and harder to manage. And to find a path through that leads to the sort of potential for growth or even just resilience. AI helps you to unlock that. AI helps to speed up finding some of those solutions. AI helps you to map that landscape and work out more optimal routes in a much faster way than we would have done otherwise. And so it changes the conversation around what was risk and complexity, and it's all too big for us to think about, into, no, actually, here is a faster route to get to what is a more resilient and more sustainable future. And so for me, it's a tool that helps to unlock those things. And that's everything from the design of packaging through to which ingredients we would use, through to how we decarbonize, through to the car batteries that become energy sources in and of themselves. I think we are at a point of inflection that innovation speeded by AI can really help to a more resilient, a more sustainable future. Now, as you were saying earlier, it doesn't come without things to keep an eye on, but that's independent of any political framing.
I think that's right. And I think because it was over the last 12 months such a buzz phrase, I think we've talked about AI as if it's a like standalone technology for technology's sake. The truth is it's meant to be human centric. It's meant to enable us to do what we want to do in a better way. And that's the way we should look at it, rather than we're just pursuing it because it's something separate from us, because then we will get lost.
Daniel, I want to come back to something you said earlier, which links into this whole conversation, which is ethical, responsible use of AI. And you talked a little bit about the policy perspective around that. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Because I do think there's this, it's not a new question, what is ethical AI, what is responsible AI? But I think it continues to be raised, AI for AI's sake versus AI for purpose, AI for good.
Totally. Yeah, it's a great question. And I think you look at so many examples right now. You mentioned the States. You look at that Stargate investment, $500 billion to build that kind of capacity and compute. You absolutely have to look at speed. You have to, bend timelines, look at doing things quickly. That chips away at ethics, that chips away at sustainability. I think our motive to do things quickly and as fast as possible and as best as possible really challenges the notion sometimes of ethics. Canada, like many countries, has introduced policy around that. We call it the AIDA, and it looks at explainability, it looks at transparency, it looks at accountability, which I think is a big part of that. And in a way, it's helping shape, I think, how companies think about it. Some of the champions I'll uphold in that are our financial institutions. Canadian banks have always done exceedingly well when it comes to ethics and stability. Scotiabank, the second or third largest one on that list, has actually implemented it in a way that it's within their team, so they have an ethics and data team. Anyone that touches AI in the bank has to be read into that and has to be fully accountable when it comes to the use of data and ethical practices. And every employee within the organization, on their annual reswearing of their oath, their sort of oath of the job, I'm not using the right phrase there, but has to incorporate that
Code of conduct.
that's the one, thank you, code of conduct, has to incorporate that. I'm very jet lagged today. Has to
Financial services, I can help you out.
into their work. And why I like this is because they're putting the ethics first in this, and sort of the profit piece second when it comes to the use of AI and Gen AI. The real important part of this, though, I think, is the education piece. And so the banks have all been great about educating each other. They've come up as an industry to talk about ethics, to talk about fraud reduction, to talk about these big picture ideas that AI can help solve. And that's where I think when we think about ethics, we need to start leaning into.
Yeah.
And as a financial services company, I would be remiss in saying, MasterCard also, we connect the banks globally. And so, and given our role in making payments safe, simple, and secure, we have to do this as well. On a global basis, there's no way that all of you would let us process all your data globally unless we had similar processes. And I think that most organizations really understand that AI governance, right, is necessary. Data governance is necessary. Commitments to data quality, minimization of bias, incorrect outcomes, right? We do fraud processing. Obviously, you like it when we get it right. You hate it when we get it wrong. Cybersecurity, prevention of cybercrime, the cooperation that requires, right? All of these things, I mean, AI is a tool, right, to make sure that this happens. But the way you do AI, it means that it's a commitment to privacy and security, explainability, transparency, right? And so I think financial institutions understand that the type of data we handle, we have to make that job one. And so we balance innovation with risk because it's in our DNA. It always has been in how we innovate. And so ethical or responsible AI is how I think most financial and health institutions automatically default to that. And many other organizations understand that and follow similar practices just because these techniques, because AI is generative now, it learns from what you teach it, recognize that these are the right kinds of techniques and governance, and use this kind of multi-stakeholder view in their governance practices.
I want to dig into that a bit more because obviously there's a real lack of trust in a lot of from a lot of consumers in institutions more generally. There's I can't see it, I can't understand it, I don't know what it does. How can I trust it? And so, how are you educating consumers about what you're doing and making them confident? And maybe, Sarah, this is something that you, as a household company, you can kind of weigh in on.
Yeah, and I mean that goes back to the point I made earlier. It's like when you look at the appliance sector as such, without passing judgment, I'm just about to. Probably when you look at our Asian competitors, they quite heavily would advertise the AI piece in terms of it being a differentiator. I think being a Swedish company where we would be coming from is far more in terms of it empowers you to make better choices. But explain very clearly what it allows you to do, rather than it being a selling point as such. You know, I was telling someone yesterday, like there's a new kitchen range we launched, for example. It turns out that most people, when they cook a recipe, don't look at the recipe book. We all Google them. So in the future, this particular appliance, this oven, imports the recipe and automatically adjusts the settings in terms of, you know, how much energy and which ingredients and how to cook it. Now, clearly, that is desirable because it will allow you to do something better. But I think it has to be that specific in terms of its human centricity rather than, oh my God, look at this oven that uses AI. Because I think then to your point, I think also people will switch off increasingly because, you know, there's been so much media about this that I think people, to your point, will just switch off and go like, actually, you know what? I just want something very simple. I don't need all these gimmicks.
Yeah. Charlotte, I want to come over to you and think about, is AI, we talk about it being something that you can use to look at Scope 3 emissions, to understand your value chain. To what extent is AI actually accessible to industry, to companies everywhere? Is it, we are sitting here as a very developed group of economies, developed, corporations. We have a perspective that AI can solve a lot of these problems. Are you seeing that this is true in other regions, in other industries? Where does that balance lie?
I think we're still collectively educating ourselves about the potential of AI and what it can do and how it can help with Scope 3 emissions, etc. And that's true for developed economies, for industries like the ones that are represented today, and it's true for the rest of the world and other industries. I think it's a collective education that we need to do. I still think that even within the sustainability people, there is a lot that needs to be shown about the power of AI in terms of efficiency for the teams and then automation in the data, clarity on the Scope 3 data, etc. So I don't do like that much distinction. For me, it's upgrading collectively ourselves, educating ourselves on the potential of AI and also back to the point of AI is an enabler and just an enabler. It's not AI for the sake of AI. It's really what are we trying to solve? We are trying to solve for more efficiency in the team, less data crunching, less errors in the data, less manual work for months to produce an annual report. We are solving for better, more actionable data that helps drive ultimately reduction. We are solving for better behaviors in our with the consumers, etc. And then AI can help with all of that. But yeah, I would not make so much distinction.
You don't think it's going to reinforce a global north, global south divide?
Embed inequality, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I hope not, but
Does anyone else have a thought there?
collective responsibility, I think, though.
Because I think we spoke a little bit earlier about labor force and sort of are there repercussions and who's going to feel that. And I do think there's an elephant in the room question of, is AI not only going to push discrepancies between individuals, but potentially discrepancies between countries, between regions? So any thoughts?
I do have one.
Probably.
Well, yeah.
Maybe just
Yeah, go ahead.
we run a survey every year with 2,000 companies across the globe. They represent 40% of emissions, so pretty statistically significant in terms of what they represent. And what we saw this year is that actually the less developed economies are catching up. The companies based on those countries are catching up faster in terms of sustainability trajectories, how they measure their emissions, how they set targets, how much they are in line, reducing in line with their ambitions, etc. So I would actually be careful because I think sometimes we also have a tendency of thinking that because we are the developed countries, we may be a bit ahead, and that's not necessarily.
Well, and you're proved right with things like M-Pesa back when we looked at the kind of how you could bring everything on to digital. So I absolutely see your point. It's more of I don't think we explore that question that often, and I am curious to hear people's perspectives on it.
So MasterCard has our Center for Financial Inclusion and Impact, and we really pay a lot of attention to this question, and we do a fair amount of work with the Global South. And while I agree that we're catching up, there are some still, again, in this transformation moment, I think we have to be mindful that there are still gaps in the data that we use, both in the foundation models that so many of us rely on. We have language gaps, representation gaps. Too much of what generative AI learns on is still based on industrialized data from all of us because we are the majority users. And so the models are biased toward industrialized, westernized thought. It doesn't mean that it's not represented, but depending upon what you are solving for, who you're solving for, what populations you are trying to create product solutions, services for, you need to be very mindful. And then that also goes to modeling techniques, your model teams, who is in the room when you're solving, right? And all of that really does matter, depending upon, again, the use and the markets, right? And so while I do agree that we're catching up and that we're more mindful of the challenges, we need to make sure that we are a global connected planet if we're going to be solving for a global connected planet. And so that is still a gap. And I think we have to be mindful how we're solving moving forward.
It sounds like some of what you're saying is AI, as it gets developed, as it gets built, as it gets trained, needs to be trained within local markets to match the contexts that are sitting there. We didn't come to you on the value chain question, but David, what do you see? Do you see opportunities to use AI to scale circular economy principles to really kind of take what we know to be good practice on sustainability and grow it? What potential do you see there for the scaling of our solutions?
Well, I was just reflecting on the last few minutes of the conversation, and I think there are risks. But if I also look at emerging economies, the choices that they want to make to blend both growth and a low carbon economy or a low water economy have a benefit they can create from AI. And the learning, let's not lose track of the fact there's an awful lot of learning that AI helps you to sift and capture very quickly. If you want to make a choice about which technology you want to apply, and you haven't got a lot of money to spend, which by definition emerging economies don't have, then you want to get the best value for that investment that you make. And AI helps you to get to that solution without going through perhaps decades of learning that maybe established economies have gone through to get there. Your point about M-Pesa is very well made, that it shifted the way that rural economies, not just rural economies, but especially rural economies in many parts of those emerging economies worked. It empowered lots of people because technology enabled a different type of financial economy. I think AI can bring exactly the same benefits to those same economies to help them identify what is the optimal solution for a low carbon, low water economy and growth through innovation in their location, because it captures all of that learning and helps you to sift it so quickly. You don't have to take decades to get to an answer that we've taken to get to in this country. It also means you can leapfrog some of the infrastructure challenges that we face, just as M-Pesa did from a banking point of view, especially in Africa. So for me, yes, the glass can be half full. You've got to keep an eye on what are the challenges. You've got to go into it with eyes open. But the opportunity is absolutely there. And when I speak with suppliers, particularly in countries, Indian subcontinent especially, they are looking at this as a way of finding the best, the most, let's not say the best solution, the optimal solution now, and then build from that quickly. And it means they are catching up.
Before we open the floor to one or two questions, if you had to direct investment into one question around AI, what would each of you direct it into? What do you think is the biggest question that needs to be answered to capitalize on AI?
You said it earlier, didn't you? It's like understanding the consequences on labor markets. I think that's the point, because it's for us. It's to make our lives better, not to replace us. That's the point, isn't it?
Sure, to see if you all agreed with that.
I would supplement that with education.
Yeah.
Right.
How to write a good prompt.
There you go.
I promise I didn't plan this in advance. Do we have any questions from the floor? Go ahead. Do we have a microphone? Microphone coming. Up at the front here, Maxine.
I am Isabel Devon. I'm at the Carbon Trust. This is like the 5th panel on AI and sustainability that I've attended. It's like, to me, it's a no-brainer. Who is giving you a hard time? I mean, are you trying to convince stakeholders, shareholders, other people? Who are you trying to convince? Because it seems to me like this is coming and it's a normal thing. So why are we defending it? I mean, there's all sorts of issues, but who is your main objector here? So we can understand, so we can help.
I haven't got any objectors. It's a simple. No, I think you're right. Sometimes we're in this little echo chamber, and we need to be alive to the challenges, but as long as I said before, going in with eyes open and being aware of the risks as well as the opportunity it can create is a critical conversation. It's absolutely unlocked a different way of dealing with decarbonisation in our business, no doubt about it. As a result of it, I now know the 24 raw materials that comprise, give or take, 50% of my carbon footprint. And that means I'm talking about 200 suppliers, not 20,000 suppliers. Life all of a sudden starts to make progress because it's manageable and it's accurate, and it'll only get better.
To ask you a question, do you think we're wasting our time then, perhaps sitting here talking about AI, and instead we should be talking about other issues?
Don't waste your time. That would not be polite. I do think let's evolve it. Let's evolve it, because I attend a lot of events, because I'm at the Carbon Trust, right? We're out there in the world. I just keep thinking, why are we defending this? Like I said, there's all sorts of advantages. Yes, there is the labor issues. I mean, I worked with lawyers in the past, and they knew AI is going to take a lot of their jobs, because that's what's going to happen. So I just say, let's progress this. This is an exciting thing. As I said, this is a good thing. So yeah, let's move on. I mean, instead of spending an hour discussing, you're kind of waving it a little bit on the edges. Let's just say, okay, this.
It's really interesting that you say it's about defending. I think for us is about understanding.
Sure.
Yeah.
About learning it, because it is new, and I think all of us are in a continuous learning journey about it. So I think that's the point of the conversation. I didn't feel like we're defending it. We're just giving examples of what it could mean.
I think also in the past 2.5, 3 years, it has been the conversation about disruption. Okay. And what's happened now with the economy, the political, and everything else, it is actually the stable conversation in the room. Everything else is disrupting, and this feels very stable. And I think that's the shift.
Yeah, we've used the word trust, I think, between all of us multiple times up here. It's this type of dialogue that I think builds that.
Yep.
The way I look at it is there will be winners and losers when it comes to AI and sustainability. But I think at the end of the day, we want everyone to win. And this is a start that way.
I think that for me, that's the key point. Having the conversation like this helps you go in with eyes open, helps you understand and be alive to what unintended consequences could start to arise, and then to manage them as you move forward. Not having the conversation means things hit you from left field further down the line. This gives you a chance to learn as you're going with some context around it.
I am sorry, we crossed our overtime. We have a big red flashing light here. But thank you so much to the panelists. Thank you for the question. And
Thank you. Well done. Thanks very much.
thank